Hello, my name is Beth Nelson, and I am a member of the Foxleaf Authors Workshop here at Foxleaf Books at 24 West Broad Street in Cookeville, Tennessee. And I am here today to interview the leader of our group, Mr. Troy D. Smith. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you very much.
And Troy is a professor of history at Tennessee Tech University. He also leads this author's workshop and is a published author himself. Troy, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the books that you have written?
Well, I will start by mentioning the book that I'm proudest of. It's not a new book, it's been out for a while. It's called Bound for the Promised Land. And this, well, one of the reasons I'm so proud of it is that it's something that deals with a lot of issues I feel are important. It's the story of a man born into slavery and his lifelong search for the meaning of freedom. And it follows through a lot of historical eras, which, as a historian, that's important to me. But also it deals with the concepts of what is freedom. And I was very, very honored that this book won the Spur Award from Western Writers of America for the best novel of the year that it came out. Past winners of that have ranged from Louis L'Amour to Michael Landon for an episode of Little House on the Prairie for best teleplay. So I enjoy being in that kind of company, deserved or not.
Well, and I know that you have written a lot more than just history books and written outside of the Western genre as well. What are some of your other book titles and other types of writing that you've done?
Well, when I first started writing and taking it seriously and trying to get published, I enjoy a lot of different genres, and so I wrote mysteries and horror and science fiction and fantasy and westerns. And the first thing that I sold was a western to Louis L'Amour Western Magazine, which was a wonderful magazine that I wish had not folded right after they took my first story, because I thought that was going to be my gravy train. But because I had a western published, it was a lot easier to get more westerns published by saying, I was in the Louis L'Amour Magazine. So it took me a little bit longer to get the other things out there. But I do still work in all those genres. I don't think of myself as a western writer exclusively. I think of myself as a writer. I have a mystery novel, a crime novel called Crossroad Blues that is set in Nashville in the 1950s, and it's in a community of blues musicians. It's about this harmonica player who gets caught up in a crime and has to clear his name. And I have actually a series of short stories based on that character, another series of short stories called Dead Rednecks. That is a crime series about two brothers in Knoxville, one of whom is an ex-convict and the other thinks he's a detective. He has issues. So I write horror and various different things.
Sounds like you've had a lot of fun with different types of characters in your books.
Absolutely.
Allows you to put on another hat and be somebody else for a little while.
That's right. I really like Kirk Douglas as an actor, but also as a writer. In his later life, he became a novelist, and one of my favorite quotes is that he said one time he much prefers being a novelist to being an actor because you can play all the parts. And that's absolutely true.
Very well said, yes. Now, you've told a story in class about how you got started in writing and where you were working at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell our listeners that story?
Well, I spent actually many years cleaning floors. I was the floor guy from the time I was in high school. And when I was in probably about 19, 20 years old, I had this job where I would be locked in Kmart for 12 hours at a stretch. I've worked at Walmarts and Kmarts and etc. But I'd go in at 9 p.m. and have to stay until 9 a.m. when they opened. And I wasn't working by the hour. I was a contractor, so I just had to go in and do the work, which didn't always take, sometimes it only took 3 or 4 hours to buff the floor. So I had all that other time, but I was locked in. And they frowned on, just crawling off and going to sleep somewhere, so I had to do something. I read all the books that they had, and I went through this Louis L'Amour jag. I ran out of things to read, and I got really bored, and I started thinking to myself, if I had written that story, I think I would have done it differently. And so I started thinking about how I would have done some of those things differently. And then I started entertaining myself as I was buffing by making up stories. And then I would write them down for my own entertainment. Didn't even occur to me that I could possibly get anything published. And I wrote like that for a long time until a lot of those stores started staying open 24 hours. That sort of put a kink in things for me because I was in the habit of buffing along and rehearsing dialogue to myself. And when you're locked in there alone, that's okay. But when there's customers around, they kind of look at you a little strange when you're having arguments with yourself, buffing along. But that's how I got started.
Sounds great to me. Hey, I've met a lot of people in Walmarts and Kmarts that still talk to themselves, so you probably would have fit right in.
They could be, writers in training. You don't know.
They could be.
Or not.
Well, and speaking about getting published, you now have your own publishing company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the publishing company and some of the imprints that you have?
Well, it's something that just kind of happened accidentally. I was fortunate, I guess it's about 4 years ago, that actually this publishing company, Western Trailblazer, which initially had started as a romance publisher, branched out to westerns. I've actually been very surprised myself to learn that a lot of women like westerns, not even just western romances, but traditional westerns. So this company, which was owned by Rebecca Vickery, was branching out. And I heard about it sort of through the grapevine, through a writer friend of mine. And I had never published anything online, never had any ebooks or anything. So I got in touch with the publisher and sent them some of my stuff that was out of print, some stuff that had never been published. And some of it really started selling. I was selling better than I ever had, which was great. And Rebecca was a joy to work with, but she has a lot of health issues. She has lupus and some other things, and she's not able to focus. And so after working with her and her publishing a lot of my stuff for 3 or 4 years, she actually asked me last summer if my wife and I would be willing to take over her company, Western Trailblazer. She kept the romance part, but she wasn't able to handle all of it. And she said it was because, I had some publishing experience already because I'm a member of a group called Western Fictioneers, which is a professional writers organization that's geared exclusively toward people who write fiction about the Old West. I'm very lucky there. I fell into that too. I'm one of many people who were our co-founders, and I wound up being the second president of the organization. And we started our own Western series, Wolf Creek. Actually, I'll just promote myself shamelessly right here. I am one of many people who is Ford Fargo. But since I was the editor of this series and had assumed publishing duties of it as well, I had developed some experience with publishing. So that's one reason Rebecca asked me to take over. She didn't want to just sell it to a stranger because she felt a sense of obligation to all the editors and artists and writers. So after discussing it with my wife, because my immediate response was, boy, that sounds like something I'd like to do. There's no way on God's green earth I could have time to do that without help. And my wife offered to step in. She's very good with the bookwork and stuff, the literal bookwork as well as the book work. So that's how we got started. We decided, since we're going to be doing the westerns, why not branch out? So we decided, instead of just being Western Trailblazer, we are Cane Hollow Press. That's the overarching umbrella. Western Trailblazer is one part of that. We have an imprint for science fiction and fantasy that's called Ravenflight Press, and we have several things out there. We have an imprint that is geared toward inspirational stories called Ebenezer Press. A lot of people hear Ebenezer and think of, Ebenezer Scrooge. But the biblical Ebenezer, that means that's a marker for how far you've come with God's help. So we have that imprint, which we've got a couple of things out. And we have a horror imprint, which is totally the opposite of that, called Wendigo Books. I feel like I'm missing something. Perfect Crime Books. We don't have anything out from that yet, but we're looking for crime stories.
Sounds like you're a very busy guy.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and that's just like my side thing.
Right, when you're in your spare time,
yeah,
right?
Exactly, and I say that laughingly.
Well, Well, we certainly are very fortunate to have you here with us today and here with the Foxleaf Authors Workshop. And we thank you for coming, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much. I'm real glad to be here.